29. You find out through a mutual friend that your partner had an erotic dream about a coworker. How much would it bother you? A great deal. Quite a bit. Somewhat. Very little. Not at all. 30. Would you feel threatened? Extremely. Very much. Somewhat. A little. Not at all. 31. How would you react? I would bring up the topic casually, maybe with humor, and discuss it with him. I would angrily confront him. I would get back at him by sleeping with another man. I would leave it alone. I would calmly ask him to discuss it with me. I would have to break up with him. I would get back at him by leading him to believe that I too am having fantasies about one of my coworkers. I would confront his coworker. 32. Your partner has to leave town for 2 weeks on a business trip. It just so happens that among the people who will be joining him is the coworker he had the erotic dream about. How much would it bother you? A great deal. Quite a bit. Somewhat. Very little. Not at all. 33. Would you feel threatened? Extremely. Very much. Somewhat. A little. Not at all. 34. Would you call him at unexpected times to check if he's in his hotel room? I'd call several times a day. I'd call once every day. I'd call a few times throughout his trip, but not every day. I'd call a couple of times. I wouldn't call at all. 35. Would you insist that he call you several times a day or that he stay at his hotel? Not at all. Not really. Maybe. Probably. Absolutely. 36. You are walking down the street with your partner when you meet a very good-looking man who smiles at him and says hello. He smiles back and returns the greeting. How much would it bother you? A great deal. Quite a bit. Somewhat. Very little. Not at all. 37. Would you feel threatened? Extremely. Very much. Somewhat. A little. Not at all. 38. How would you react? I would completely ignore the whole thing. I would ask him angrily who the man was. I would ask him casually or calmly who the man was. I would ask him who the man was with a slightly irritated or concerned expression on my face. I would pretend I didn't notice what happened. I would act unpleasantly until he noticed that something was wrong. 39. The two of you are going out with some friends. It just so happens that among the group is a mutual friend's buddy, the one your partner greeted on the street. Your partner spends considerable time, more than he usually does, grooming. What would you be thinking? I would think absolutely nothing of it. I would be flattered, thinking that he is dressing up for me. I would assume he wants to feel good about himself tonight. I would assume that he wants to look nice for everybody, including me. I would wonder what his hidden agenda is. I would assume that he's trying to look especially good for that man. 40. How would you react? I would compliment him on how good he looks. I would accuse him of trying to impress that man. I would pretend not to notice, but act irritated. I wouldn't comment or react. 41. You are having a really nice time during your outing with friends. You have a few drinks, dances, and reminisce about the good old times. Your partner asks you for another dance, but you're a little worn out and want to rest your feet. The man whom your partner had greeted on the street, however, offers to take your place and he accepts. How much would this bother you? A great deal. Quite a bit. Somewhat. Very little. Not at all. 42. Would you feel threatened? Extremely. Very much. Somewhat. A little. Not at all. 43. How would you react? I'd suddenly feel much better and cut into the dance. I'd confront the man right on the dance floor and tell him to stay away from my partner. I'd take the man aside after the dance and tell him to stay away from my partner. I'd sit there and stare at them the whole time. I'd sit there and throw dirty looks at the man the whole time. I'd ignore the man or treat him rudely the rest of the night. I'd take my partner aside and tell him off. I'd ignore my partner or treat him rudely the rest of the night. I'd sit there and glance at them from time to time. I wouldn't do anything, it's just a dance. 44. Your partner is going out for dinner with his friends. It is obvious you are not invited. How much would this bother you? A great deal. Quite a bit. Somewhat. Very little. Not at all. 45. Would you feel threatened? Extremely. Very much. Somewhat. A little. Not at all. 46. How would you react? I wouldn't let him go. I would get very angry and irritable with him, and make it obvious I am not happy about him going out without me. I would try to make him feel guilty about going out without me. I would be annoyed, but I would try to hide it. I would get back at him by going out with my own friends one night. I would wish him a nice time and do something on my own or with my friends. 47. You are sitting in a friend's car, waiting for the green light at a busy intersection. Suddenly, you notice your partner walking down the street accompanied by a rather good-looking man whom you've never met before. How much would this bother you? A great deal. Quite a bit. Somewhat. Very little. Not at all. 48. Would you feel threatened? Extremely. Very much. Somewhat. A little. Not at all. 49. How would you react? I would get out of the car and confront them. I would get out of the car and follow them for a while, just in case there was something fishy going on. I would ask my friend to follow them in the car and see where they end up. I wouldn't think anything of it. I would ask my friend to honk so I can wave at them, this way my partner will know that I saw him. I wouldn't do anything at the time, but I'd casually mention to him later on that night that I saw him walking down the street. I wouldn't do anything at the time, but I'd confront him accusingly later on that night. 50. A friend mentions to you that he saw your partner spending his lunch break with an old flame. They seem to be talking rather intimately and generally having a really good time. How much would this bother you? A great deal. Quite a bit. Somewhat. Very little. Not at all. 51. Would you feel threatened? Extremely. Very much. Somewhat. A little. Not at all. 52. How would you react? I'd confront my partner when he got home and accuse him of cheating. I would break up with him. I would discuss it with him calmly. I would confront his former flame and tell him to stay away from my partner. I would start an affair with another man. I'd bring it up when he got home, making it obvious that I'm somewhat annoyed. I'd start meeting him for lunch. I'd start calling him during his lunch break to see what he's doing. Nothing, I wouldn't think anything of it. According to your score, you sometimes do the right thing in jealousy-inducing situations, but there are several occasions when your reactions may be a little more blatant. When your jealousy is provoked, you'll let it show, and not always in the most appropriate manner. In general, however, you seem to be able to monitor your behavior and try not to let it get out of hand. From the viewpoint of a partner, jealousy is generally very unbecoming, but the good news is that it can be controlled. This is best achieved by addressing any underlying issues you may have that can trigger your jealousy. If, on the other hand, it's your partner who thrives on jealousy, and perhaps even goes out of his way to instigate it, then it is a pretty safe guess that he has an issue that needs to be addressed, as it could really sour your relationship.